Welcome back to the OHSU Effect. I'm Lacey Evans. So, did you know that your food choices could actually be making your spouse unhealthy? With me now is Dr. Tina Kaufman, an assistant professor of cardiology in the OHSU Department of Cardiovascular Medicine. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, you focus on lifestyle modification and risk factor reduction. So let's talk about how, our choices are affecting our spouse.
Sure. The things that I focus on primarily in preventive cardiology are behaviors that we have control over or that are actually modifiable. So some of the biggest risk factors for heart disease are diet, and when by diet I mean nutrition, choices of food, your weight, whether you exercise or not exercise, smoking, cholesterol, blood pressure, those types of things. Those are all the kinds of things that I look at when somebody comes to me in clinic.
So you've also focused on nutrition, like you said, food. So
Right.
You kind of say that food is like cocaine. Talk about that.
So there's actually some studies, predominantly in rats, so they're not directly relatable to humans, but we do know that when subjected to an unlimited diet of high-fat, high-calorie foods, not only rats, but people will eat almost addictively. And we know that the first bite, it's just like a cocaine addict, their first high, they're always chasing that first high because the second, third, and fourth and subsequent highs are never as good as the first one. And part of that is because your brain actually becomes tolerant to that level of what we call dopamine, which is a neurochemical in the brain. So that when you eat something that's very high fat, very high calorie, the next time you eat it, you're not going to derive nearly as much pleasure. And so you eat more to get the same amount of pleasure, and the next time you eat more. So one of the tricks I tell people is, look, if you like macaroni and cheese, which I love personally, I know I'm not going to deprive myself of it, but I know that first bite is going to be the best bite. So I might only eat one or two bites and say, okay, I'm done. I got my taste of it. I know it was the best taste. If I ate a whole bowl, that last half of the bowl is not going to be nearly as good as the first half.
But that's so much easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. That trick won't work for everybody. You have to have a little bit of self-control to be able to do that. But if you just, for me, I don't like depriving myself of something I really like. So I like ice cream. I like macaroni and cheese. Those are all really high-fat foods. So if I give myself permission to have a few bites, I'm less likely to overeat it if I know that in the future I'm going to have it again.
So do you recommend diet food and dieting?
I don't. I actually almost never use the word diet, partly because diet implies a beginning and an end. And really, in order to lose weight or maintain a healthy weight, you should pick foods that are healthy for you, that are not unhealthy for you, that you like, that you enjoy eating, and that are sustainable, so that when you finish losing the weight, you won't change the types of food you eat. You'll just eat them in different quantities.
What are some misconceptions about adopting a healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, so people say it's too hard, it's not fun, it's not tasty, it's not palatable, and mostly people say, I just don't have enough time to do the shopping and the cooking and the preparing or to exercise. I think those are all workable. There's a cartoon I use in my lecture that there's a doctor and a patient, and the doctor says to the patient, what do you have more time for, 30 minutes a day of exercise or 24 hours a day of dead?
That gets the point across.
That's right.
Well, you mentioned them briefly, but what are the greatest risks to our health?
I think really probably two of the greatest risks, and I don't know which one's greater, but certainly sedentary lifestyle. We as a society, mostly in the United States, we don't exercise enough. And basically, exercise has been engineered out of our day. And so we know that sedentary lifestyle is a huge risk factor, much more risky than exercising itself. And then the other one is poor nutrition. In the United States, predominantly, we eat very high-fat, kind of adulterated foods that are not as nutritious. And so we actually are undernourished, even though we are much more obese than we were 20, 30, 50 years ago.
Do you advise people to kind of maybe ease into a healthier lifestyle, like adopt one or two healthy behaviors at a time?
Yeah, I usually will give people a list of things that are changeable in their lifestyle. But I don't want them to do all of it. In fact, I tell them don't do all of it, because most people, if they can't come to me and if they actually have an epiphany and say, you're right, I need to be completely more healthy, and go home and try to do everything, in the first week they're going to burn themselves out. It is too hard, because it takes a while for your body to adapt to a change, and to adopt a habit or to make it a lifestyle, it takes practice. And if you try to do 10 things at once, you're not likely to get any one of them down well. I'd rather them pick one or two things, make them part of their lifestyle, make them a habit. Once you get to be a habit and it becomes kind of rote, you don't have to think about it so much, then look at the list and say, okay, what else can I do? And it's probably going to be a process over a number of years. I mean, we didn't get to be unhealthy quickly. It took a number of years for us to get this way. It's going to take a while to get back to adopting a healthy lifestyle.
Well, let's talk more about that spouse connection. How can you keep other people healthy? Is that even possible?
Yeah, that's a little tricky. And in my talk, the title of my talk is How to Make Your Spouse Healthier. It's kind of a double message because, in a sense, I'm going to tell you can't. But there are some studies that show maybe you can, and I'll kind of give that at the end of my lecture. But basically, adopting a healthy lifestyle for yourself is the surest way to affect somebody else's behavior.
And you mentioned that when people are healthy in groups, that is helpful also?
Yeah, in fact, if you just know people who know other people sometimes, that will influence your behavior and say, well, maybe it's doable for me as well.
Good, good. Well, what do you recommend that people eat and foods that they should avoid? Do you have a list like that?
I do. And actually, a colleague of mine, Sandy Mackey, who's also a PA, came up with these 5 food rules, and I kind of co-opted them from her, so I can't really take credit for them. But the first rule is eat mostly foods that existed 100 years ago, foods that your grandparents would recognize or that you could easily find in nature. Okay, that's rule number 1. Rule number 2 is eliminate trans fats and high fructose corn syrup from your diet, because those are actually clear indications of highly processed, unhealthful food products, which actually breaks rule number 1. Right? Mm-hmm. Rule number 3, if it won't go bad, it can't be good for you. And mostly things that don't go bad have trans fats, which is a stabilizer, so that breaks rule number 1 again. Rule number 4, keep it colorful. The best way to get a good variety of nutrients and vitamins and minerals is to eat your colors in terms of brightly colored vegetables and fruits. And rule number 5, drink plenty of liquid that does not contain sugar or sugar substitutes. So if water, like water, unsweetened iced tea, or even flavored waters with natural fruit flavors.
Well, tell me when your lecture is.
So my lecture is November 8th. It's at 7 o'clock at the Center for Health and Healing on the waterfront.
And you're going to be talking about this spouse connection.
I will be talking how to make your spouse healthier and much more in detail about the kinds of things you should be doing, you shouldn't be doing. And then we're going to go over basically the 4 probably most often neglected modifiable risk factors, which is nutrition, your weight, exercise, and stress.
Good. Well, great. Dr. Tina Kaufman, thank you for being with us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
The OHSU Effect on KXL.